Hello, hello, Jason. Hello, Lisa. Let's see if Leo come. Um, where is Leo? Let's find Leo. Oh, there he is. Hey, speaker. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's a beautiful day. Audience, my name is Eduardo. I am a marketing manager here at Modern Sales Pros, and I have a fantastic lineup of speakers here today to talk about sealing the deal when sales meets legal. CLM's perfect match. Feel free, audience, to go into the chat and tell us where you're tuning in from. We love to see the global footprint of our elite community. I am based in New York City, but today I am in Boston. As I said, we got these three fantastic speakers here today, and they will give you the insights you won't find just anywhere, only here at Modern Sales Pros. And talking about Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and finest community for more than 35,000 members in sales management, leadership, operations, and enablement. We are all about taking the road less traveled and bringing you along for the journey with us. Our mission is to help you tackle tough questions and discover opportunities you might not even know exist. And we do this through live events like this one you're about to experience. We have an engaging online forum and our must-attend summits. And we are expanding to array of in-person events. I have one in Boston here today. Um, Nationwide. So we might be coming to a city near you. So make sure to check out our website and keep up with our agenda. If you're not part of MSP yet, we will review your details after this event. And then if you're a fit, we will extend an exclusive invite to join our community. But let's focus now on how to get the most out of this event. Heads up, this event is being recorded, audience, and you will be able to access the recording right after the event's done, so you can get the knowledge whenever you need it. And if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A anytime, and we will make sure that your questions are answered in the follow-up. We have three sponsors here today, and we have three speakers from each sponsor. So I have Jason from Conga, I have Lisa from Accenture, and Leo from Salesforce. I will pass the mic to Jason. Jason, you can take it from here. Introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your company, and we can introduce the other speakers, and then we can jump into the content, and I'll be back later for some outro notes. Sounds good?
Thank you, Eduardo. Hi, I'm Jason Smith. I'm Senior Principal of Strategy and Transformation for Conga. I'm a 26-year recovering attorney. I've been in-house counsel, I've been in private practice, and I've been a legal technology consultant focused on everything from e-discovery, matter management, e-billing, contract management. I've been involved in about 100 contract management projects over the years, and I'm prior chair of the State Bar of Texas Corporate Counsel section and Computer and Technology section. And I work for Conga now, and we are a revenue lifecycle management leader in this space, which includes things like CPQ, configure, price, quote, contract lifecycle management, billing, and e-signature. And we help companies really gain revenue advantage and what we call solving the revenue friction zone. Some of what we're going to be talking about here today between sales and legal and finance and all of the stakeholders in the process. I have two amazing speakers, two of my favorite people in this world. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I would probably demote them if I tried to explain who they are and what they do. So I'll start with Lisa. You're on the top in the video here, so I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Bloomberg. I'm a managing director with Accenture. Accenture is a global consulting and technology services firm. We're in every country we're authorized to do business in, and we basically help organizations transform their systems, technology, people, data, and process. I am one of the global subject matter advisors on contract lifecycle management. I also am I'm an attorney, former practicing attorney, and have a long history of commercial transactions and transforming commercial sales, as well as the legal and contracting and compliance organizations. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Leo?
Thank you, Lisa. Leo?
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jason, for having us. Léo Murgel, I'm the SVP and COO of our Legal and Corporate Affairs team here at Salesforce. Salesforce is a leading enterprise software provider We focus on enabling our customers to connect to their customers in a whole new way, and a really a leading player and what we call the enterprise AI revolution, enabling our customers to bring the power of generative AI into your processes and into their accelerating their relationship with your customers in a whole new way. I'm excited to be here. We partner deeply with Accenture and Conga across the ecosystem and around the world. So we're excited to have this conversation with two great partners.
Awesome. Thanks, Leo. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to bring a cross-section of folks here to give good vision of what it looks like from the internal in-house perspective, what it looks like sort of from the consulting perspective. I'll have a little bit of the vendor perspective as well as sort of the other perspectives as well. We're going to have this as just really kind of an informal fireside chat. If questions do come up, I'm going to try to monitor them. Can't guarantee that I'm going to get to all of them. We can always do follow-ups after the fact. But really what I wanted to kind of start with here is kind of positioning. What we're going to break down here is talking about this sort of life cycle of contract management into three buckets. When we look at contract management, we see some statistics in the market, that if you have a CLM system, you can increase your sales productivity by 20%. Trying to get sales and legal and other teams to work together seamlessly, that's really when we see the magic happens. Well, maybe it's not magic, but like intelligent, data-driven, client-centric contracting is more like it. But let's face it, in the business world, that's probably as close to magic as we can get. We're going to talk about client centricity, and I'm going to ask Lisa some questions here, and it's really all about putting the client first, and how do we do that without turning our legal teams into full-time customer service reps. We'll talk about kind of strategies to make clients feel like royalty without really compromising the legal team and other supporting teams' rigor. So Lisa, I'll start with you. How can legal departments better align with sales teams to ensure that they have a seamless, positive client experience throughout the contracting process?
I think there's three critical areas that we focus when we do transformation services with our clients. One is self-enable sales as much as you can by providing the right tools and resources while ensuring the right controls are in place to mitigate and manage risk. And then the second thing is, set up a legal contracting front door. A legal front door can enable access to legal support and services in a very controlled and tracking way. And there's a number of technologies and automation capabilities to do so. And then focus on that client experience. So important to focus on the client experience. What's the experience of the customer? What's the internal experience of legal providing the services to the business, and the business, getting information and requesting services of legal? All of that has to be, an important focus as you design your contracting processes, as you design your workflows. All of that has to be the human-centric experience.
And do you see ways to measure that? Do you have ways to track that kind of satisfaction?
Yeah, well, part of it is on the sales side, it's cycle time, right? How long does it take? How many rounds do I have to do before I get to an end-to-end contracting process? It's, client feedback. There are surveys associated with it. It's, the ability to capture the revenue faster because you've closed that deal faster. These tend to be the ways, or some of the kind of metrics we've seen as been critical indications. Also, the cost of contracting. We've encountered scenarios where you have a low dollar, high volume business that actually costs more to contract. The contracting process costs more than actually what you're making revenues. These are the kinds of data and information that typically helps the sales team or legal measure satisfaction.
Leo, how does Salesforce prioritize client centricity within the legal operations space specifically, in particular in context of contract management?
Yeah, I think that it's there's sort of a broader answer than a specific one, I think, to legal. I think that the real key to the platform that what we could refer to as sort of the C360 platform, the customer 360 platform, is really sort of the heart of it. When engaging with customers, both internal or external, the 360 view of all your interactions, and not just your personal or your department's interaction, but 360 view of all interactions with our customer is fundamental to understand. We at Salesforce believe that in alongside of the work that we've done with Conga and as well as with Accenture across many, many customers, a platform that brings together all your customer interactions is really the starting foundation of that 360 view of the customer and in creating processes that are customer centric. Second to that, and I think if you expand on that work of that platform, particularly when you're in a B2B environment where you have a seller team, a team of sellers, really being sort of that front end to the customer, you want to treat them as your internal customer. You want to put them at the center, right? So we at Salesforce believe that in leveraging our own platform, really look at the seller at the very center of it, and all those seller support teams, legal included, as part of sort of that ecosystem that tries to create that 360 view frictionless experience for the seller. So we don't think about, I think it's very much what Lisa said in terms of intake. We refer to as matter management, but really it's the intake for all the seller support functions. And how do you bring legal not as a bespoke experience outside of that? Because to close a deal, legal is definitely one key partner of that journey, but there are many others, right? And you really want to bring them all in a sort of a coherent and consistent experience to the seller, so that they are really spending all their time interacting with their customers and extending the customer needs and bringing those forwards, and not navigating sort of complexities of internal businesses and trying to figure out what they need.
I love that. And I love the way that you mentioned the 360-degree view of all interactions. And a lot of times we get very myopic when we think of contract management, and we're just looking at the document. We're looking at the contract, the commercials, and legal within those four corners. Of course, as legal, that's typically how we look at contracts anyway. But when we start thinking about there's a relationship behind this document, and I think sometimes that gets lost a little bit in that we are two partners trying to head the same direction, and sometimes we get into the sort of adversarial nature in contract negotiations, let's say, and we forget we're trying to accomplish something together versus being on opposing sides. And then you turn it around and say, but we also do the sort of 360-degree view of the interactions internally with our stakeholders internally. And again, I think sometimes as organizations and as humans, we naturally get into this sales versus legal mentality versus we're all on the same team trying to row the same direction. So maybe it's a, what is that, 720-degree view of the interactions with customers outside, customers inside. And I think that's really important, because you can't get to client centricity in contract management by just looking at what are we doing in the negotiation cycle, because that's probably 10% of that overall relationship. Lisa, yeah, go ahead, Leo.
No, I was going to say, we try to make sure that we see the customer throughout its interaction. We leverage data cloud to understand the customer's early interactions, maybe through sort of digital and early engagements, all the way through the very touch points and participation in events, their full purchasing life cycle. And many of those customers may have started their relationship with Salesforce around a different product, right? So you have that. So often the customer is not truly a net new customer. So that 360 view to bring into context and including the contracting process, I think is very, very important.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Lisa, kind of along those lines, what ways do you view technology and process improvements to help that, to enhance the communication and transparency, I say between legal and sales, but really kind of all the internal stakeholders to ultimately then benefit that external client?
Absolutely. So it's interesting on the 360 view. We very much at Accenture, plan for that, and in our transformation work, we will focus on that. So, for example, we're seeing in the sales side that from the client perspective, right, the improved response times, like through the virtual agents and better customer care and service. Through a better understanding of the customers, Leo was talking about, enhanced customer interaction and tailored value proposition. Ironically, when you shift to the contracting process, which is part of that end-to-end interaction with the customer, right? It's not always aligned to a tailored value proposition. It's aligned, in order to drive efficiencies in the contracting process, which means shorter cycle time, speed to close. You have to kind of drive standardization rather than a tailored language per customer contract. And so there's a little bit of a tension. And one of the things that we do to kind of we see successful optimization in this space is, like Leo was discussing, you prioritize, segment your client deals, so the right resourcing and focus goes to the high value deals, and you automate your high volume, low risk dollar deals per risk framework and defined like risk appetite. You standardize and you simplify your processes and your contract templates. I mean, do you really, we walk into clients and they have like 10 NDA templates. I don't know, as a lawyer, I think one bilateral NDA template, even if you translate it, I don't mind that you translate if you call a separate template a Spanish or whatnot, but do you really need 10 templates, right? So some of these processes can be really, really automated, in the end-to-end capabilities, right?
And I think even stacking on top of that, you talk about kind of analyzing the high value, the high volume, low risk, the low volume, high risk, and then there's the high volume, high risk, low value, lower. There's another component to it, which is, some of this is bespoke, some of this is automated, and then some of it just needs to be thrown out. Some of it just needs to stop being done, right? Like push it back to self-service to the customer, or just stop doing it. And I think 10 NDA templates is one of those areas where let's get on the same page and figure out why we have 10 and maybe it's one variation with variable components to it, at which point then you can create sort of dynamic capabilities. And that leads me, Leo, to kind of the technology question. Like, what strategies or tools are you guys using internally? Kind of a loaded question, I know, but what are you guys using internally to make sure that the legal processes sort of complement and enhance the sales cycle?
Yeah, I think it's a follow up conversation to the conversation around the platform, right? So those agreements don't exist in absence of the richer data set for the client to understand what's the region, what's the opportunity, what's the risk associated, what's the vertical, and so forth. So you bring in all those broader sets of your agreement, of your sort of customer ecosystem into your contracting process, and leveraging that to leveraging a CLM to draft, the appropriate, we believe, balanced agreement that will very quickly get you to a mutual agreement with your customers on the legal front. We also, as Lisa mentioned earlier, make extensive use internally of Service Cloud as a matter management, really just in this broad set of seller support space to really infuse all the seller support operations right in the context of the opportunity, the account, so that as the seller is interacting with our customers, they can just really at their fingertips being able to reach out, request for support, and almost in a way that, and then we've actually just launched this recently, in a way that sometimes one of the challenges, particularly as companies get big, is to figure out who's the right team to ask that question, right? So we're actually now using generative AI to allow the seller to ask the question in natural language, obviously, and have the system then route that question to the appropriate case management team that is best suited to support that question. And even removing that barrier, right? That sometimes itself is a barrier of entry. Like, this is a legal question, this is a finance question, this is a compliance question, and depending on how companies get, and you start exposing that complexity to sort of a big company complexity to your customers, and it's never a great experience, right? So putting the seller at the center, really thinking about them as a proxy to your customers, and how can we make that experience as frictionless as possible, and maybe extending on what we talked about is just really we all have learned how the journey of Gen AI is evolving. There's a few models out there. You want to be interacting them in a secure and trusted way. But at the end of the day, the differentiation between the results you get is really the ability to ground those Gen AI interactions with the right rich data set. So that, again, that 360 view of the customer and all that customer related data allows you to also maximize the use of Gen AI and bring that at an enterprise quality to your business.
Yeah, and I'll buy completely into legal Gen AI when I ask it a question and it tells me it depends. But until then, I'm a little suspect. You kind of, it was a good segue into reducing the friction, and I think this is why these topics, we came up with these buckets, because going from client centricity into reducing friction are really mutually inclusive. And you even kind of touched on it as well. How do we reduce the friction in that process where there's a lot of start and stop, there's a lot of sort of adversarial components? How do we make it, I always say, how do we make legal and sales do more of a dance and less of a fight, less of a boxing match? Lisa, from your experience, how can, like, organizations that you work with effectively streamline that contract management process to reduce friction, accelerate the deal closure while still maintaining that balance of compliance and risk mitigation?
It's going back to the kind of client centricity and also the human centricity. So, number one rule when we're working with our clients or legal departments or whatnot, it's align the right role to the right tech, the right data, and the right tasks and process. So whether that role is sales, legal, commercial ops, pricing desk, contract administration, risk, or finance, we find that sometimes the technology that is enabled for these groups, they may not need certain technologies. They may need different capabilities. So, for example, CLM brings a ton of functionality like centralized repository, standard, the ability to find your contracts. That's fantastic. Standardized templates and clause language libraries and workflow automation and redlining to support negotiation and search, now supported by AI and Gen AI, which, as a former practicing attorney, I'm actually seeing, you're right, I've never seen it say it depends, but it actually does help me find some of the information that I'm looking for. But if you dig deeper on what the role of sales is, right? Sales needs to be able to request a contract. This is like the Pez dispenser concept, right? Let me request a contract. Some sales desks need to heavily negotiate. Sometimes there's term sheets, sometimes there's not. But for the most part, they need to just be able to request the contract, understand where the contract is in its process. They need some data within the four corners of the contract. And what are the risks and obligations that are emerging in the process of the sales and negotiation process? Legal needs to understand where the market is on contract language. So, for example, many legal departments have preferred and fallback provisions already configured in their contract lifecycle management, tools and capabilities. Over time, as the client or counterparty, sends red lines back, you can capture that data and understand where do I need to update my preferred and fallback provisions, am I market? Like every lawyer, when they're doing deals, every commercial deal lawyer knows where legal language is market, right? Where the indemnification provisions are. So a lot of these platforms and the data and the Gen AI, pilots on top of it, right? The ability to kind of query your data, your contract data, allows you to kind of get a sense of where market is and where emerging risks are happening. I understand that at times that sales needs to negotiate with their clients, but the big question here is, can the process be streamlined so it's done with some other form, whether it's terms and conditions online in an e-commerce sort of way, or is it through term sheets? And let's get sales necessarily out of the contracting negotiation process and right size the role of the legal department.
Yeah, and I love that because a lot of times, especially again, bias from the legal perspective, lawyers typically view this process as I've got to make sure I have my hands on every transaction to make sure things don't go sideways. And if you've been in litigation in the past, it's even more so. But I think that's where the beauty of CLM really comes into play because you can have those legal hands touching every transaction without having the lawyers having to be involved in every transaction. And that's where I say we kind of institutionalize the knowledge. It used to be, there's the senior attorney that has all the answers. They've been in this space forever, and he or she, they just know how to work with all these clients or work in this market or do all of this stuff. Now that kind of knowledge, like you said, as we're asking it questions and sort of trapping those answers into the system and being able to analyze it, we can now use that knowledge for even more junior folks to be able to process this stuff without having to stop and call legal at every step of the way. And I think even the Pez dispenser, sometimes people think I love that analogy, but I think some people, when they look at that, say, okay, if I'm going to put technology in place for contract management, it's going to be this very rigid, template driven, request this, but only this, and it has to fit this way every single time, instead of a very dynamic and fluid process, which is available with the technology that's out there, but that comes with
Exactly.
understanding your process first.
Yeah.
And again, this is the line that I always say that my salespeople always kind of cringe at. I say you have to have your process in place before you even think about the technology. I know I work for the technology side of things, but if you're going to have bad processes and you're going to stack technology on top of it, you're just going to automate the bad stuff. So
That's right.
work with folks like Lisa to get, the process figured out. Once you have that understand, then you can look to the technology to enable those processes and those things that you want, and maybe make a little bit more efficient in some areas.
And again, it's around providing the right tools and resources to sales to be able to facilitate the sales process. Like we typically hear from sales that they seek legal support because they don't really feel comfortable negotiating terms and conditions on their own from a legal perspective. We're not saying that the automation will deny any salesperson the ability to interact with legal. We're just in the when you standardize your processes and you standardize you prioritize your client, that client priority, and you standardize your templates and all that stuff, right? Like all that process standardization and template standardization, you end up being able to move faster because the number of scenarios where legal support may be needed reduces over time as the system learns of these scenarios, and then we adapt the technology to kind of be responsive to it. Again, I think to reduce friction, it's the biggest challenge we hear is the lack of clear delineation or definition of the roles and responsibilities between legal, compliance, the pricing desk, all that. And so one of the things that we do to kind of reduce friction is to ensure that there's even a RACI model, just a definition of what everybody's role is and what systems they touch, what data they need at that point, what process they need to hit. And then again, my point around get sales the right data, the right tasks, the right technology, that really helps reduction of friction.
And you focus a lot on sales and sales process when you talk about getting them the right information. But Leo, you're in legal operations, and legal operations is relatively new to the world. I mean, it's now over a decade old, but in some places it's still growing. And I view the legal operations role as the person who, or the group that kind of looks to the legal team to say, hey, we're no longer just a reactionary cost center in the business. We're going to operate like the rest of the business. And with that comes some fundamental change in terms of process. You don't normally think of a legal process. You think of legal as, a lot of people say, the bottleneck in the process. So how do you guys, and just specifically at Salesforce, how do y'all approach this whole process of legal operations, contract lifecycle management, to minimize that friction and maximize the efficiency?
Yeah, and I think that it's as it was an interesting journey, right? The area of legal operations, because in this first decade of it, this first stint of it, it's really a lot about bringing operational best practices that have been sort of deeply explored and implemented in other functions, like that are typically operationally more mature, like finance, HR, and sometimes IT, and adapting them into the realm of legal. If you think about IT, had been working on tickets for a long time. HR teams work on tickets or cases internally for a long time. There's this notion of matter management or legal intake is a fairly quote unquote new idea in legal, but it's nothing more than the sort of adaptation of those same concepts of workflow management into the space of legal. I would say that one of the key components, one of the key advantages where I see the more mature legal ops teams navigating towards, and something that we focus on as well, is that it's not a function necessarily just turn inward into legal and look into the legal process, but really turn and look into the peer groups of ops leaders in revenue operations, in finance, in all those other teams, and in unison with them, be building cohesion in the corporate overall process. Again, we started with that client centricity, and I think it's incredibly important. That's why we started there, right? Nobody wants to be dealing with legal or knowing where legal is in the process. They want to just get a deal done, right? So you want to bring around the seller all the capabilities he or she needs to get that deal done, regardless of who behind the scenes is moving the components to it, right? So you want to create a uniform operational and support experience for the seller to be at their best. And the one thing that I would add to what you and Lisa were just talking about, when you focused on process as a key component to it, I can agree more with it. There's another component that was already important, and I think with the AI revolution, with the enterprise AI revolution, it's becoming even more important, is the space of knowledge management. Right, knowledge management, if you think about it in the legal space, as a discipline, that sort of started in law firms a little bit, but really it's a space of capturing playbooks or knowledge, FAQs. How do I do this thing? Right? What's the right answer to that? In the world of Gen AI, that turns out to be the very oil, the very grease that you need to feed into your alongside your prompt for the dynamic prompting to get the right answers of it.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Did he freeze again?
I'm back.
Oh, there you go.
It seems like right when I got to the
right when you get to the really important stuff.
Yeah, right. A lot of that experience is really about what we're finding is that supporting the seller not only with cohesive process, but cohesive knowledge sources that they can reference to do their business. At the end of the day, the best kind of service is self-service, right? People want to be able to do things at their own time, empowered to close their deal, to move their business. So as much as you can look at your risks, create a knowledge base that empowers your seller community to do that, and then now unlock Gen AI on top of it. At Salesforce, we have a singular portal for sellers that is Gen AI enabled. They can ask whatever question they need about the selling support process and then get their deal done. They'll get a generative answer to it, which is grounded in reference to the right knowledge articles that explain that. And if they need further support, from that point they can engage an organization, but they're engaging it based on the topic they asked. They never thought about, oh, I need to go to legal. They asked a question, they got an answer, routed to a specific knowledge article that maybe expands on that answer. And if they need support, they'll reach out. In essence, becomes the owner of that knowledge article. But they don't know that, right? It's just really a uniform platform for them to get the support they need.
And Leo, like at Accenture, I tell you, we have something called the KX, and we have over 700,000 people globally. And, you know, the thought leadership and the intellectual property that we have, I can learn about anything, whether it's, you know, access management or security or resiliency or cloud. And that KX, what's really important from a legal, this is how a legal front door can also help. From a legal front door, it's not necessarily legal, you're right, it's an enterprise front door, but you can, you know, can match you to the right, you know, skilled stakeholder in legal, find my lawyer, find my content, you know, find my process, find my job aids, help aids. All of that also can be translated back to the commercial sales end-to-end process, including the contracting piece. So we find leveraging the KX or knowledge exchange capability platforms, and also facilitating the information lifecycle across from, you know, from prospecting all the way through invoicing, all of that, that data that's transferred from one point to the other. We're finding that many organizations, that's one of the main challenges they have, but once they start to manage and get their data organized, they're starting to see a lot more insights to help like drive the right business decisions for them.
Yeah, if I may just add a thing, I think you said something, Lisa, that's just it's been really top of mind for me in this last year or so. And I think it's this notion, it really ties to legal. I think there was a pre-Gen AI, and there's really been a pivotal change in the technology there's technology now that allows computers to make sense of unstructured text, right? Agreements. If you think about the old, there's not a whole lot of data in legal, and it's really because there was a lot of data. I mean, there's a ton of data, but it wasn't really great. It wasn't data as in the old technology could understand in terms of rows and columns. There's some of that, but not a ton of it. But there's a lot of data, and data now is being reinterpreted through the lens of unstructured data as well. So this is what I think I'm incredibly excited. And I mentioned earlier, there was this last 10 years been sort of this first stint of legal technology and legal operations. But really now, I think, in an inflection point, because of the technology is enabling us to unlock the power of all this unstructured data that in legal are really, playbooks and knowledge articles and agreements and negotiated agreements, all those things that were less sort of digestible from a computer systems perspective is now accessible to computers, and allows us to, in the context of workflows and automation, really bring that powerful to light. I mean, incredibly, I feel like we're all, it's been a great journey of technology and legal and all the work that companies like Conga and Accenture have brought forward. But I think we're all incredibly blessed to be here at this moment where the technology is such a pivotal transformation for our space.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I might be dating myself now here as the old man on the panel. We've had this technology in e-discovery for 30 years. I remember doing some of this stuff with large scale data sets back in the 90s when I was in law school. what was interesting was it was always used in a reactive mode. It was always involving litigation. It wasn't a business process use. And I think what we're seeing now is that transformational shift of those similar technologies that we've had in e-discovery, where when litigation popped up, we had to sort through terabytes and petabytes and exabytes of data that existed. Think back to Enron and some of these other big, litigations that we had, where we just had to sort through tons and tons of data, and it just wasn't enough to try to scale human teams to be able to do all that and then collect all of that knowledge. I think what's happening now is with legal operations, we're unbundling what legal actually does. And I think what we're seeing in that unbundling over the last decade is that there is the legal knowledge stuff, the practice of law, and then there's the business of law. And it used to all just be bundled up. Somebody'd throw something into a black box of the legal department and wait for it to get resolved. And I think what we're seeing now too, and Lisa, going back to what you were talking about, supporting the business and supporting, and I always hear this a lot where it's like, legal needs to be better about supporting the business. But I would take a contrarian view also and say the business needs to be well versed in supporting legal. And when I say that, I was at a conference just a few weeks ago with a bunch of healthcare folks. We talked about contract management. And they said, you know what really gets to me is when people send me the contract and they say legal needs to review this. And it's clear the business has never even looked at the contract. They didn't even open it up. So now legal has to do all the business thinking and all of the legal thinking. And I think that's where technology is bridging this gap to help legal support in the way they've always supported, but now helping the business support legal, sort of the Jerry Maguire moment of help me help you. And I think even like with the knowledge exchange, the KX that you guys have, you're taking all of that institutional knowledge now and putting it into something where people can easily tap into it. Because I know back in the olden days, back in the 1900s, you had to not only you had to know who knew the information in order to go find the information. And sometimes just figuring out who had the answers was 90% of the battle and the challenge. And now, again, like Léo said, with technology, with Gen AI, we can start harnessing all of that information into one place and start, using that for, and I think you mentioned the data in legal, but I also think about the legal in the data. And so the flip side of, when we talk about all this and this kind of takes us to the next section here on the intelligent data-driven contracting process, we often think of what is all of the commercial data or all the business-related process information that's in that system that we can harness to make things better. But what about the legal side of the data? And so, Léo, you've mentioned Gen AI a couple of times, and I'll start with this. And Lisa, maybe you've seen this across companies, but how are companies setting up sort of responsible AI? Because, we've all heard the horror stories of the Gen AI, and honestly, as Sam Altman put it, the hallucinations aren't a bug, they're a feature of what generative AI is supposed to be, which is cool when you're doing creative work. I use Gen AI all the time. I use ChatGPT for building outlines for presentations or doing creative work. But when it comes to drafting legal documents, you got to be a little bit more careful. So how are you seeing companies setting up from a responsible AI perspective?
Yeah, I think that there are many dimensions to that, right? So obviously, one of the first things that come to mind, you want to have typically a cross-functional team internally to make sure you're deploying AI in an ethical way. Right, and us humans have bias. AI has bias built into it. So I think that at the ethical lens of is this the right process? At Salesforce, for example, we don't believe AI should be used to determine making hiring decisions or firing decisions. There's a whole realm of type of the processes that you want to make sure that you always want to have a human in the loop for those processes. But I think that when you think more broadly about what the modern enterprise AI enterprise looks like, it starts with trust. And trust, I say this more from a starting from the sort of the old school security privacy lens to you have a trusted framework to interact with those models where you know that your data is tier data, your data is not being used in ways that you don't understand or realize, that people don't have access to through AI to data that they themselves in their role wouldn't have otherwise have access to it. That's where the metadata platform comes into play. So that trust component is where it all starts. But then to answer your question around hallucinations and creativity or not, it's really, I think, that's where the data comes in. We spoke about that before. When you're interacting with a model through any sort of interface, it's assuming that you have a trusted way to interact with some of the sort of those foundational models, and there's no data is not being capped or being used for training and things like that. But if you're just asking those models questions, you're really relying on their knowledge that they've picked up from basically gobbling up the internet to bring accuracy to your answer. And that's not a great strategy, right? Because as we all know, the internet is not the world's most accurate. There's a lot of great things on the internet, but there's also a lot of not great things.
I don't know. There's a lot of legal experts out on Reddit that I think are feeding information
Exactly.
into some of these models.
Yeah, but I think the key thing here is that what we call dynamic rounding, or folks refer to as RAG, which is to really ground your interaction with the model with trusted data, trusted knowledge, right? So if you're asking a question about, what is are those terms in alignment with my playbook? You got to be able to feed your playbook that outlines what are your risks alongside the right components of your playbook alongside the request to the LLM, so that you that you can ground and sort of narrow the aperture of the model to say what's the answer to this question, given that the answer is in this document set that I'm feeding with you with my question, right? So I think that space is really what differentiates, I think, the opportunity for accuracy versus just a sort of free-for-all hallucination component.
And Lisa, I think this is where legal really kind of stands up and says, all right, this is our time to shine, because when you talk about Gen AI and prompt engineering, you're really talking about understanding how to ask the right questions to get to the right information, which is what we were all trained in law school to do as litigators, anyway. But like, how does Accenture see, working with customers to set up responsible AI? How are you guys doing it?
Well, it's interesting. So the way the AI models process data and read and understand is very different than the way a human would read. And so what we've done, a lot of the work we do is on, again, going to the prompting concept, is translating, being that bridge between the way the machine reads and operates versus the way the human operates, and to make sure that those are connected and robust, right? And so we have things like the operating room where we come in and we test models. Many of our clients, we're helping them set up ongoing capabilities to continue testing. So there's testing as you kind of take a pilot and you either put it into experimentation mode or you put it into production. There's a testing, but how do you continuously have an ongoing testing program to ensure that your models are performing the way it is? The other thing we typically help our clients do on the responsible AI is got to set up the right governance. Léo talked about a group of individuals with the right skills and the right functions, but also including policies and procedures and controls that fall across all three lines of defense and legal. So 3 lines of defense is, the front office, and then compliance is the second line, and the third line is, an audit, and then legal, because of the, legal advice and privilege concept, sits across all of it. We find that many of the legal functions are still learning about Gen AI and its capabilities. So much of what we do with our clients is helping them come up to speed to understand what the technology can do, where are the critical risks, where they're vulnerable, and also just what are the controls and that needs to be put in place for responsible AI. I think at first a lot of the legal departments that I worked with were, oh, this is not going to work, or there's a lot of resistance to it. But Pandora's box is open, and I think now where legal needs to step in is providing. First of all, there's a ton of regulation coming out. I know that we have the executive order here in the United States and the EU AI Act. All of this regulation needs to be interpreted and provided to the business so that they can structure their responsible AI governance.
And I will say on that note, I don't know if you saw, but down here in the Fifth Circuit actually rejected the proposed new changes to regulating AI. And they fell back, and honestly, I kind of think this is right. They fell back on the idea that the rules and regulations and the ethical responsibilities, especially for legal, already exist. And if you look at some of these cases where people have used AI, I know we're a little bit off the topic, but where they've used AI for briefs that have fake cases and they file them, that was just bad lawyering. They didn't shepherdize cases. They didn't do what a lawyer is supposed to do. It wasn't the technology did bad things. Technology did what it was supposed to do given the context. And I think going back to what you said and tying it back at the beginning earlier when I asked you about the metrics and how do you measure client satisfaction, things like client satisfaction metrics, the cost of contracting, the cycle time, all of those things are data points that then can feed into, and I think that's where we're at now, is that inflection point of the technology can now take all of that byproduct information and recycle it into something usable again. And a lot of stuff that we used to just sort of ignore before we had CLM systems, everything was manual, send a contract, review it, FedEx it, get it signed, hard copy. We didn't really measure the cycle time of where is it starting and stopping each part along the way. Now with a CLM, that's just a byproduct of the data is a byproduct of what we're already doing, and then can be used to inform where do we streamline, where do we do things better, faster, where should we get rid of steps.
And Jason and Leo, you both mentioned about the existing wealth of knowledge that legal already has. Part of what the Gen AI tools are able to do is to help you access that knowledge base faster. And I find that quite interesting. It just helps you work faster. And as a former practicing lawyer, a commercial lawyer, right? The ability to say, find me, the choice of law, or find me if there's a cap in the indemnification provision, or find me if there are rebates or credits that are due to the customer, and then put that in a table and then translate that into French, right? That is fast. That's fast. And it's with a responsible AI program, with the ability, to understand how the models are behaving, that coupled with that type of risk mitigation activities and controls, you can really, expedite that speed to market revenue capture abilities, right?
Absolutely, and I'll say I was impressed with when we were even doing our own in Conga with the generative AI, and we took a 300-page contract, and it took less than 5 seconds to find the carve-outs. Like that would have taken me, quite a bit of time to set aside to try to figure that stuff out. Now, again, it comes with legal oversight. There still needs to be some level of review of that work, but that's been the same responsibility all the way back to what I mentioned earlier with e-discovery, when we started using ALSPs, or alternative legal providers, or non-law firms to do some of the work to support the legal department. You were still required as the lawyer to review any non-lawyer work. And I know I use the word non-lawyer, a lot of people hate it, but really a distinction here between practice of law, not practice of law. Leo, how does Salesforce use, you guys have a wealth of information internally. How do you use data-driven insights to really optimize your processes and your strategic decision-making within the legal department?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think it's maybe three-pronged. One is tie back to so that some people refer to as legal intake. matter management, case management, all the work of legal throughout our business, not just the seller-facing one, but all the work into legal today is managed through, in essence, cases through Service Cloud, and we call it matter management. But it's really having insight into the work. First thing you need to do is understand the work, right? It's like when the work is lost in people's inboxes, then you're really off to a sort of a difficult start. So I think you start from there. You start to understanding the work. I think you spoke about earlier about unbundling. When you capture the work in some kind of a case type structure, and like I said, we use Service Cloud for that. It allows you to then also move it around, allocate, assign that to the right people at the right level. I think we see a trend, we definitely see here at Salesforce. The legal department is an ever more cross-functional, cross-professional group versus really where all the lawyers sit. You have a wide gamut of professionals working together, legal professionals, not all lawyers, working together towards the outcome and capturing the work through matters, through cases, allows you to move it around at the right stage of it or for the right component of it to be done by the right skill set at the right price point and the right speed as well. So that's one component to it. And then that gives you a whole telemetry around the work. How much work's coming in, how much work's going out, who's doing the work, what phase of the work, right? That full life cycle view to it. For sure, on the agreements part, the CLM solution gives you another wealth of data about the agreement, right? So if you think of a little bit separate between what's the work, the agreement, it's long standing, right? So it stays on for a long time. It's amended often over the year relationship with the customer. So now you have a whole wealth of intelligence around one agreement and your collection of agreements about positions you've taken, your journey with that client, that customer, so on and so forth. And as we spoke, the third one is there's those two first ones are often examples of structured data, and those we have had and we've been mining and understanding our business through it. And now we have this whole realm of unstructured data to mine and use and accelerate around knowledge articles that we use to both assist our internal clients as well as assist our teams working on the matters. But also then you can tap into another layer of data that is in the agreements that might not have been expressed as metadata in the past. Right? So you can now really inquiry your agreements in a whole new way.
And now the data about the data as well. And we're about to wrap up here. I think we're almost out of time. Lisa, I'm going to give you the last word. So think of something really cool to leave us with, the mic drop moment. No pressure. But to refer back, you did mention something about contracts that cost more than the contract value, which I thought was really key, especially when you get into intelligent data-driven contracting. Because for me, that was one of the things I learned a few years ago with Conga, being able to utilize the system to actually stop the contracts, stop the wedding before it's official. Sometimes that can be actually more valuable than winning the deal, and then the cost of the deal costs more than what you actually earn on the contract. And so using that data from past deals to inform the current deal can really help you save a lot of money in just not even doing a deal in the first place. I know that's a little counterintuitive, especially to you salespeople on the phone, so I apologize in advance, but that's the cold hard truth, I guess. So Lisa, you get the joy of wrapping us up here.
Yeah. Well, you've heard me say the art of the actual, right? What as a former practicing lawyer, right? Legal has a couple things that they've shifted in their focus. They like sales need to run its department like a business, and so you need to be data driven in order to do that. The second thing is, the provision of legal advice is a form of enterprise data. And so for that provision of legal advice, it's critical that, you have an ability, the organization has ability to access it and to access through a proper front door, through the workflows that Léo was talking about, through smart allocation tools, which we've seen in large scale operations models, contracting management and contract operations and administration models to allocate the contract to the right skill, whether it's outside counsel, whether it's in-house counsel, whether it's shared service, or even outsourced alternative legal service providers. That ability and to track that, that's what we're seeing the art of the actual, and it's quite exciting. And then you add Gen AI onto it, where you can move faster, with the proper controls, as we've talked about. I do believe we're gonna close deals faster. That's what I'm excited about.
And in a moment of admission, I will say I heard Lisa use the term art of the actual instead of art of the possible probably 6 months ago, and I stole it, and I've been using it wildly ever since. So this is the moment I come clean on that. I want to thank you guys, Lisa and Léo. Thank you so much for joining me. I always enjoy seeing you guys and speaking with you, and love sharing your knowledge to the world as well. Eduardo, I don't know if you've got some wrapping up here.
Awesome. Yes, just thank you all so much for this knowledge. The content here was amazing. I will have to cut out my notes here because I have too many key takeaways. But audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We love having you here. Speakers, thank you so much for this knowledge. And I also want to say thank you to our partners at Salesforce, Accenture, and Conga. If you like what they discussed here today, there's a requested demo with our sponsor button at the top of this page, and their team will get in touch with you soon to change your life. One reminder, this event was recorded, so you will receive a link on your email, and you will be able to rewatch everything here said here today again and again and again. So thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much, speakers. We can go hang out backstage, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.